Hello, my friends, and happy Thursday night. I hope you had a great day and you're continuing to stay healthy and stay home and keep this crud and yuck away from you so that we can get back to school much sooner. So I had some requests from my YouTube channel. One of our third graders, Alex, said he really loves these I Survived stories, so I wanted to read a couple more chapters in the Molasses Flood. And I know that Bad Kitty is kind of thin. I'm gonna probably record a new one, or maybe just leave that one and then do the next chapters. Try my camera a different way, but check out Bad Kitty. If there's anything that you want me to read, you can. I don't think you can leave comments because this YouTube is for kids, and so it doesn't enable comments mostly. But if you want to request a book, let your teacher know, and I have most of them on Facebook and social media and other avenues, so let me know, okay? So we are gonna do chapter 3 here. All right. Tony's face lit up as they took off running. Carmen knew he loved the taste of the thick, sticky syrup, and he wasn't the only one. Kids from the neighborhood visited the tank all the time. The tank leaked. Molasses was always dripping down the sides like ice cream melting down a cone. Kids would scoop the molasses into their mouths with their fingers or turn sticks into molasses lollipops. Who needed to waste a penny at the candy store when you could get a taste of molasses for free? I thought you hated molasses, Tony said as they trotted along. Carmen shrugged. Maybe I'll take some to Rosie. Rosie was a horse, an old mare who lived at the stable where Papa worked. Carmen liked to take her out for rides after school. They'd go to the park by the harbor. Rosie would nibble on the grass and Carmen would write letters to Nana. Her grandmother loved hearing about all the people in the North End, but Tony was her favorite. She called him Trottolino, Wild Boy. But today, Rosie and Nana's letter would have to wait. It took only a few minutes to get to the tank, which rose up over them like the mountains in Carmen's village back in Italy. Except the tree-covered mountains were beautiful. The tank was hideous, brown-painted steel covered with syrupy slime. Tony slammed his hand onto the sticky tank. I win, he said gleefully. Carmen grinned at her friend. She'd finally cheered him up. Nana's voice echoed in her mind. Ben fatto. Good job. Wow, Tony said, pulling his hand away from the tank. His fingers dripped with syrup. It's leaking like crazy. Tony was right about that. The tank always leaked a little, but today the goo was bleeding through the lines where the sheets of metal came together. Thick streams of molasses ran down the sides. Tony stuck his finger into his mouth and closed his eyes. He said, tastes like Cracker Jacks. Carmen dipped a finger into the syrup, then took a cat-like lick. Blech! The molasses tasted sweet, but with a bitter black licorice aftertaste. She shook her head and made a face. Tony laughed. Then he smeared some molasses above his top lip, making a sticky brown mustache. Hello, he said, lowering his voice. I'm Mr. Lawrence. Recess is now against the law. They both had a good laugh. Let's find some sticks, Tony said. He started walking around the tank, scanning the ground. Carmen didn't need a stick. She'd had enough molasses, thanks. Plus, being this close to the tank gave her a queasy feeling. She tried not to look at the dead flies stuck in the goopy puddles on the ground. She wrinkled her nose as she breathed in the sickly sweet smell. Blech was right. She stared at the tank, wondering why it leaked so much. Whoever built it did a bad job. And why did the molasses company have to put such a big tank right here? It blocked out the sun and ruined the views of the harbor. And Carmen hated to think about what all that molasses was used for. She'd heard Papa and his boss, Mr. Vida, talking about it at the stable a few years ago. They were in the little back office playing cards. Carmen was brushing Rosie. They say it can hold more than 2 million gallons of molasses, Mr. Vida said. 2 million gallons? That sounded like enough to fill a big pond. Papa whistled. What did they do with it all? Carmen had been wondering the same thing. She knew some famous American foods had molasses in them, like baked beans and gingerbread. But 2 million gallons? That was a lot of gingerbread. It's used for bombs, Mr. Vida said. Bombs? Papa said with surprise. Carmen nearly dropped Rosie's brush. Was Mr. Vida joking? No, he explained that the molasses went to a factory where it was boiled down into something called industrial alcohol. Then it was used to make dynamite and bombs. Strange, Carmen had thought. But then Rosie had snorted, impatient to get out for a walk. Carmen put the tank out of her mind. Back then, the molasses tank was just one of many strange things about America. Carmen had only just figured out that red socks weren't things you wore on your feet. And why did so many English words have sneaky letters that made no sounds? The bombs didn't mean much to Carmen either back then. The Great War had just started, and America hadn't yet joined the fight against Germany. But now, 3 years later, tens of thousands of American soldiers had been killed in brutal battles. She knew this war was bloodier than any before. There were new kinds of weapons, like machine guns that fired hundreds of bullets a minute and poisonous gas that burned soldiers' skin and lungs. Carmen stepped back and stared at the ugly tank as if she was seeing it for the first time. She pictured Mr. Lawrence limping through the classroom. Suddenly, this molasses didn't seem like any fun at all. She looked at Tony, whose face was covered with goo. She couldn't help smiling a little. "Hey," she said, "are you done yet?" "Just one more lick," Tony started, but he was cut off by a sound, a low, gurgling growl. Grr, gug, 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 grr, gug, 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 gug. Chapter 4. The growling noise got louder. Grr, gug, 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 grr, gug, 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 gug. "Is it dogs?" Tony asked nervously. He looked around, wide-eyed. Carmen's stomach tightened. The North End was infested with vicious stray dogs that roamed in packs. They howled in alleys at night, and many of them had rabies. If you got bitten, you'd die a grisly death if you didn't get rabies shots stabbed right into your stomach. The sound got even louder. Grr, gug, 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 grr, gug, 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 gug. The ground around the tank shook. Carmen's heart pounded. Could it be an earthquake? She didn't think they had those in Boston, but what did she know? She whirled around, ready to grab Tony and bolt. She imagined the North End crumbling apart like her village back in Italy. But the men working along the waterfront seemed to be doing what they always did. They were rolling their barrels and lugging their crates, talking and laughing. "Look," Tony cried. Carmen followed Tony's gaze to the tank. The metal in front of them was vibrating as if it was breathing. Is there something in there?" Carmen thought. Her heart skipped a beat. What if it's, But just as quickly as the noise started, it stopped. The tank went still. Carmen and Tony were so focused on the tank, they didn't hear the footsteps creeping up behind them. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" boomed a voice. Carmen practically jumped out of her skin. She and Tony slowly turned around. A big-bellied man with a greasy black beard and small, mean eyes stood over them. He was holding a huge club, and he looked like he was ready to crack some skulls. "You're not allowed to be here," he growled. "This is private property." Carmen realized he must work for the company that owned the tank. "Sorry," Carmen said, her voice shaking. "We were just worried. We heard noises coming from the tank." The man shook his head and rolled his eyes like she and Tony were scared little babies. "So what?" he said. "It's always going to do that. Molasses makes noise. It boils up sometimes." He raised his club. "Now, get out of here before I give you something to cry about." Carmen and Tony took off. The stable was only a couple 100 yards away. They stopped to catch their breath behind a shed. Their eyes met, and they burst out laughing. "I thought there was a monster inside the tank," Tony cried. He made a face and turned his sticky hands into claws. "Roar," he said. "I'm the molasses monster. Slime shoots out of my eyes." "Or maybe it was a shark," Tony said, turning his claws into a fin. It sneaked onto the molasses ship and then wiggled through the pipe into the tank. Carmen smiled. Tony really was smart. It was true that the molasses came to Boston on big ships. The ships traveled from Cuba and Puerto Rico, islands in the Caribbean. The molasses was pumped from the ships into the tank through a giant pipe. Carmen caught her breath and brushed some dirt from her coat. She didn't admit to Tony what she'd really thought when she heard those noises, that a person was trapped inside. What if a worker had fallen in and was drowning, being smothered by the disgusting bitter goo? Just the idea made her heart pound with horror. But now she looked at Tony's grinning face and laughed. "Wait until Papa hears about this." Carmen and Tony burst through the squeaking stable door. Instantly, Carmen felt calmer as she breathed in the smell of hay and horses and heard the loud nicker of hello from Rosie. The mare was the only horse still at the stable at this time of day. The others were out pulling wagons back and forth across Boston. Rosie was too old to work anymore, but Mr. Vita loved her too much to sell her. Rosie poked her white head over the door of her stall, flicking her ears and snorting softly. Carmen gave her a kiss on the nose. Tony rubbed her head. He loved her too. Rosie stuck out her long pink tongue and started licking Tony's fingers. Tony laughed. I think you like molasses even more than I do, he said to Rosie. Papa, Carmen called, we're here. Carmen expected to hear Papa's cheerful voice. He usually came running out from the back to wrap her and Tony in a big hug. But it wasn't Papa who appeared, or Mr. Vita. It was Tony's mother, Mrs. Grasso. What was Mrs. Grasso doing here at the stable? Who was watching Tony's little sister and little brother Frankie? And then Carmen noticed the worried look on Miss Grasso's face. More than worried, Miss Grasso looked scared. A stab of fear slashed through Carmen's chest. Had something happened to Tony's father? Had Frankie broken his arm again? Did one of the girls get bitten by a rat? But wait, why was Miss Grasso looking at Carmen? Why did she have tears in her eyes? Carmen, mia cara, my dear. She took Carmen's hands. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but your papa is very sick. Uh-oh. Okay, so we're going to leave that at chapter 5 for now. And I'm going to try and also read some Charlotte's Web. So that will be a different post. And possibly another picture book. We'll see how Miss D feels after dinner. All right. We'll be back soon. Bye.